Well, hello everyone, and just give us 1 second to go live on Instagram. There we go, and we should be going live on Instagram too. Well, hello everyone. I want to talk about perimenopause and putting on weight because this is a topic that so many of you are always frustrated about, and especially for those of you who've been living a healthy life a long time. You're eating everything right and you're keeping a clean score in your diet. You're trying to sleep well, exercise the same as you would do it before, and suddenly that weight just creeping in and you can't get rid of it. So I know many of you can relate to that, especially when you enter that 45, 50 benchmark spot and then beyond. And it doesn't get better for most of us because we don't want to be like reducing calories and doing crash diets. Like those things are from the 1980s. We want to manage that in a healthy and positive way to see what we can do about it. So that's really what I want to dedicate the call to today. And we are broadcasting on Instagram as well. So just tell us first, where are you coming in from? I'm wondering, where are we reaching people from all the way to? So are you from the US, or are you where in the US? Are you in Europe? Are you in Australia, Saudi Arabia? I don't know. So tell us that. And before we start talking about the whole debacle of weight gain in perimenopause, I also want to, for those of you who are new here, I want to just mention a couple of things. One is, if you wonder where I am, I am in my camper van, where I spend 6 months out of a year in a van in Mexico, just because I love the desert. You might be seeing some, one of the windows, I think you might be seeing some cacti here. I love warm, dry weather. My body just like all my body cells and membranes are just vibrating with happiness when it's nice and warm. And I do not do well in Colorado, where my house is in Boulder in Colorado. So, but I am going back towards the end of May. So people always wonder where I am, and they go like, are you calling me on a flight or something? And you're in an airplane, or where are you? So I'm in a camper van. And so we've got Puerto Rico and California and New Zealand, and somebody from Russia and Denmark, Louisiana, Isle of Anglesey. I've never heard of that. I am sorry for my ignorance. Awesome. All right. So before we dive into the weight issue, the second thing I want to just mention briefly, is you might be seeing me teasing the heck out of you in social media, and I am about something big that's coming. And so we do have a very big project that was partly inspired by me living in a camper van and wanting to simplify my meals and do healthy preps, quick preps, meal preps, but also keeping it healthy, nutritious. And I couldn't find something that I was really what I wanted for my body. And I think if I want it, then many of you here who appreciate clean stuff, clean products, clean food, would appreciate it very much. So we're going to be revealing the product in just a couple of days, but just stay tuned. There's something big coming, and I think you're going to love it because there is nothing like it in the market. And we've got also somebody, Maria from Mexico. Hola, Maria, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué tal? We've got somebody from Kentucky, Illinois. Well, welcome, everybody. And while I'm going to dive into the whole weight debacle in perimenopause, I'm wondering here, if you can just drop in the comments on wherever you are, what are some of the things that you have done so far to try to manage that weight and that inflammation that is happening as you enter perimenopause? I'm just curious, so just share that with us as I'm diving in. And I would just say one thing. The good news is that we know in perimenopause, everything shifts, right? That's one of the difficult things about perimenopause, is that things are just never going to be the same as they were before. That's that's just reality of it. And so therefore we need to pivot. That's the reason why things that you did in the past, like maybe restricting calories, exercising more, have worked in the past, but they don't anymore. And the big reason behind weight gain in perimenopause is hormonally related. So we really need to support our hormonal health rather than be going after dietary restrictions, or I am going to be talking about some diet stuff as well, but that in its own, just like diet as in like calorie restrictions on its own, are not going to resolve the issue. So one of the things you need to know that is going to be like an all-encompassing concept that I'm going to be talking about is that there isn't one thing in perimenopause that you can fix to lose that weight, whether it's belly fat or whether you're putting that weight around your thighs and your arms, whatever it might be. It's not just one thing. If it was one thing, you would have known about it by now, and you wouldn't be emailing us and telling us how frustrated you are. So I also don't want to trivialize it. I don't want to oversimplify it, because everybody has a different reason why you might be putting on that weight. So I'm going to be going through the different hormones that might be causing a weight gain. And we're going to be talking about estrogen, low or high. We're going to talk about progesterone, cortisol, and blood sugar levels. Those are the 4 hormones that can impact your weight gain in a huge way in perimenopause. I'm not going to talk about thyroid so much on this call, just because otherwise I'm going to be sitting here for 2 hours. And with me today is my new colleague, Heidi, who is based in Boulder, Colorado, and she's going to be helping today with picking up some of your comments and posting them and letting us know, posting links as well. If you need links to quizzes, products, or whatever it is that I'm talking about, just ask, and she's going to help us out with that. Okay, so the first thing, the encompassing concept around all of those hormonal changes in perimenopause is one word, and that is inflammation. The minute you enter perimenopause, and how many of you here actually know if you're in perimenopause? Just drop a yes. Like if you know you're in perimenopause, just drop a yes. Many women actually don't realize they're in perimenopause until much, much, much later. But for those of you who do know you're in perimenopause because your period is not the same, you're starting experiencing shorter cycles, heavier periods, maybe shorter bleed days, hot flashes, and let's see what else. Sleep. You said you can't sleep anymore. You're putting on that weight, right? Yeah, so many yeses. How do I find out? That's another. So listen to the symptoms that I'm mentioning right now, right? So you can do that, or you can do testing, blood tests, a simple blood test with looking at your FSH and your LH hormones that are elevated will show that your body is trying to is already entering perimenopause. So the word inflammation is really key, because that's the reason why in our space, in the functional nutrition, functional medicine space, we always say that the minute you enter perimenopause, your hormones start going completely crazy. That's when the inflammation starts kicking in. And so one of the big things to recognize then is that dealing with our hormones is going to be creating the biggest shifts to calm that inflammation down. And of course, the inflammation is going to be even worse when you have a highly inflammatory diet, when you're drinking a lot of alcohol, you're dependent on sugar, right? Those things are going to just be making everything a lot worse. So let's talk about the first one. So I'm just going to mention here, so many of you are asking, saying, yes, you are in perimenopause. You already know it. And let me tell you, I was in perimenopause for like 7 years before I actually figured and realized that actually I was already in perimenopause. It started way earlier. I just didn't know. And that's one of my biggest shifts this year, is that in the new book that I'm writing about perimenopause is to create awareness about perimenopause way, way earlier. So you don't think that your body's betraying you. It will make a lot more sense to the craziness that you are experiencing. And not only when you're getting hot flashes, because typically hot flashes begin, like they're kind of like already when you're mid through a perimenopause. It starts a way, way, way earlier before that. And typically it starts with cycle changes. It starts off with fatigue, somebody's mentioning. It can start off with having a lot of like mental health issues. Somebody's asking on Instagram, if your period stops in my mid-40s, does it mean the menopause and perimenopause? So if your period stops and you have not had your period for full 12 months, then yes, you are in menopause. Before that, it's still in perimenopause. So for example, if your period stopped 8 months ago, most likely you are in perimenopause. You're going through perimenopause right now. All right, so let me explain the first thing that is happening. And then the first hormone that we're going to be talking about is the role of estrogen in perimenopause and why does it make you gain weight. So there's a estrogen is a fascinating hormone, right? And with any hormones, you don't want too much or too little any of the hormones. If it's too little, then you are having certain symptoms of like menopausal symptoms, like those, like you walk into a room and you don't remember why you walked in here for, lack of sex drive, forgetfulness, a lot of brain fog, sort of like feeling unstable and feeling very clumsy. That was one of my symptoms 5 years ago, was like, why am I so clumsy? When I started Camper Van Life, like, I don't want to be clumsy. I cannot be dropping stuff because, it's just not conducive when you're living in a camper van. What I now know, it was because of that. Low estrogen can also mean the start of osteoporosis, osteopenia, which unfortunately a lot of women only find out about it way later. So, also, like, let's talk about estrogen can also be causing things like you are in involuntary incontinence, right? So like you sneeze, you pee yourself, you want to jump rope, you don't want to go to the gym and jump on a rebounder, or you're very careful when you jump on a rebounder because you're gonna end up peeing yourself, right? And that's all the strength of the muscles as part of it, is testosterone, but it's also estrogen that's controlling all of that. So how can we correct this? And there's various ways of correcting estrogen. The first thing, the easiest way to do this is, of course, to do it through food. And if you are at the beginning of perimenopause, what I'm going to tell you is the food and herbs generally work really well at the beginning of perimenopause, but may not work later in perimenopause, so or in menopause. So, for example, who here wants to guess what is the number one food that contains very high levels of estrogen, phytoestrogen? So they're natural estrogens. That is one of my favorites. I always talk about it. If you follow us for a while, you would know that is one of my favorites. Let's see if anybody can guess what is my favorite food. And I'm going to circle back to this in a second of what the food is. But other than food, there's also herbs. Some of you may know that I'm a certified herbalist. And the herbs that are high in phytoestrogens are things like red clover. We have, to give you an example, my sister, when she was experiencing hot flashes, started doing red clover tea, and that helped her. Then it stopped working. She started doing it as a supplement form that helped her, and then it stopped working a few years later, and then now she's on HRT. So same as me. So that's red clover is a wonderful one. If you haven't started yet, then making a tea, just a normal infusion with red clover herb, make sure you're getting an organic one, can just really help you tremendously. Another one that is, some of you may know, like, men boobs, right? Like, why do men get boobs? And the answer is estrogen. And guess what estrogen is in one of the favorite beverages of all times, and that is beer, right? And so most beers are made of hops, and hops happens to be also very, very high in estrogen. So that's, now you know why your man has men boobs. And also a belly, right? So that's another thing that estrogen can do to men. So hops is another one. I'm not encouraging you to drink beer. In fact, you will be better off in perimenopause when you stop drinking alcohol. You really, really reduce it to an absolute minimum, like a weekend special or none at all. But you can do it in the form of supplements. You can do it in the form of tinctures. And then you have also other things like Norwegian spruce, for example. Norwegian spruce has got incredible efficacy in studies that was done on hot flashes. That's the reason why we put that in our product called Estrogen Boost, is because it boosts your estrogen levels, and it's in a pill form, right? So it's just easier to take it. So let me see. Do we have anybody who guessed what is the food? Oh my God, I can't believe nobody guessed it. I'm new here, not yet. Broccoli, close, but no, broccoli doesn't actually have phytoestrogens. Microgreens, no. Yeah, so it's actually flaxseed, you guys, flaxseed. And yeah, a couple of tablespoons of flaxseed is gonna give you some really nice boosts of phytoestrogens on a daily basis. So next time you're making a smoothie, you can just add a couple of tablespoons of flaxseed and it gives you a natural boost of phytoestrogens. Again, these things can work at the beginning. I would just want to repeat that it works typically for the beginning of perimenopause. If you are later into perimenopause, when your ovaries are really shutting down, not producing any estrogen anymore, then that might not be enough. And that's when you might want to consider the herbs that I talked about. And if herbs don't work, then it might be time to work with a practitioner and get on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, if you're highly symptomatic, because that can tremendously make a huge difference. I often get questions about flaxseed. There we go. Okay, well, dairy. No, dairy doesn't have the phytoestrogens that I know of, unless the cow is being injected with. No, well, okay, that's another conversation. I can go on about that another time. So, okay, so then so that's a big thing about estrogen here. So if you haven't done this yet, if it was me, and that's how I started with estrogen, was to just add on flaxseed on a regular basis. Okay. Estrogen can make a big difference in your metabolism as well. So one of the reasons why, remember how I talked about at the beginning that inflammation is the big cause of, is a big thing that happens in perimenopause. One of the first reasons is because when estrogen drops for too low, estrogen actually is anti-inflammatory as long as it's in the right levels. If it's too high, like in the case of the estrogen dominance, it can be inflammatory. But if it's too low, it does not support sufficiently the immune system for it to be anti-inflammatory. So that's the first reason why you're inflamed in perimenopause and you're putting on weight, is because of estrogen. Okay. So if you're having symptoms of low estrogen, the best thing to do is to start off on those phytoestrogens that I mentioned and then see how that goes. All right, let's shift gears onto the next one, which is progesterone. That's definitely one of my absolute favorite hormones. In fact, it's probably the first hormone I should talk about, because that's the first hormone that starts dropping as you enter perimenopause. Progesterone is going to be the one that shows up and you are like, oh, wait, I can't sleep suddenly. Like, I always used to be a really good sleeper, and now I just like wake up at 12, between 12 and 2. I just cannot go back to sleep. I am exhausted. I just cannot sleep. What's going on, right? So that's typically declining progesterone levels, and there's a couple of things you can do. There isn't a lot of like food stuff that can support progesterone production. You can do something called the seed cycling, which in the second, if you're still cycling in a second phase of your cycle, doing sunflower seeds and sesame seeds can help to give it the vitamin A, vitamin E. You can couple it with vitamin C to boost your own body's ability to produce progesterone. That's if you still have your uterus. And that would work. In fact, let me share with you, during COVID, like right at the beginning of COVID, I upped my vitamin C levels, and guess what? My cycle went from 21 days to 25 days. Why? Because my progesterone raised with that additional vitamin C. Did it last for a long time? No. went back right down 6 months later, and that's when I started using more topical progesterone. So that's like, I'm giving you like a trajectory, right, of things that you can do. Starting off with something non-aggressive. It's just more like supporting your body with the different nutrients to produce its own hormones if you can. And then only then going a little bit more aggressively all the way to HRT and higher doses of HRT if those foods and herbs do not work for you. That's at least something that I do for myself, and I advocate that for women to try. Why? Because I feel like it's just a gentler way of treating our body. And also, if you guys want, I can talk about why HRT. I'm not against HRT. I'm on the 5 different HRTs, and I would never change that. But I didn't get there right away, and there's reason why women's HRT doesn't work for them at times. And I will be happy to share with you why I'm noticing why it's not working. So if you guys are interested in that, then just drop a comment saying mention HRT, or just say HRT, and I'll talk about that. So progesterone, your native thing is gonna be the seed cycling thing that I mentioned, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, and a couple of 1 tablespoon each every day, ground up, and that might help you. Vitamin C, you can dose up on vitamin C until you get loose stool. So for some people, could be like even 2-3 grams a day to top up your vitamin C levels and see whether that helps. If it doesn't, that might be a good idea then to do topical progesterone, which is something that we carry in our store because I'm a big fan of topical progesterone. It has helped so many women's lives. It has helped my life in sleeping and just being calm. Progesterone has 2 main functions. So, like, how do you know if you're low on progesterone? One thing you can just test, not through blood, but through urine. There's something called the Dutch test. But if you are noticing that you are just really, it's like suddenly the sleep. The second thing starts happening is that you might be experiencing a lot of tender breast, like your boobs just hurt. The other way it shows up is that women start feeling like really anxious and unsettled. Like someone who's always been a pretty cool as a cucumber, now is just finding themselves as like a emotional wreck and just not being able to deal with adversity and issues with a lot more calmness. And so progesterone is a calm, and that's part of the reason when it's low, we start experiencing that sense of anxiety creeping in, right? So you have all these options. You can start off, like I said, with the food, with the vitamin C, topical progesterone. If sleep still eludes you and you still cannot get sleep after doing topical progesterone, then consider doing oral progesterone, which only is going to work on your GABA receptors in the brain, help you sleep. It does not give you all the other benefits of progesterone, such as bone health, vaginal health, protection for your breast. Oral just works, 80% of it gets converted to allopregnanolone, which then works on the GABA receptors. It is very calming, but it's not it's something that gives you any other benefits of progesterone. So to get oral progesterone, you need to work with a physician and get a prescription for it. Unless you're in Mexico, then you just walk into a pharmacy and you just get it over the counter. But jokes aside, but I mean, if you are traveling, for example, to Cabo or Tulum or something, then it's just something you can do and try. I mean, that's how I figured out. That's how I figured out that I can, that's how I tried progesterone. I just walked to a pharmacy in Mexico last year, and I'm just like, I'm gonna try it, right? And I tried 200 milligrams, it didn't work. I tried 400 milligrams, I slept like a log. So that's how you try it and see whether that works for you. Okay, let me see what other. Yeah, Sandra is saying, "Oh my God, that's me with the breast and the anxiety." Yeah, that's time to correct this. What do you suggest for someone who has endometriosis who has had a total hysterectomy? Look into it. Let me just take questions a little bit later, so I can just finish the whole progesterone conversation here, and then we can move on to other ones. And so stay in for this. Some good questions are coming in. I will just cover that in just a second. I want to talk about the next one, which is, let's talk about, Heidi, let's talk about blood sugar levels and what to do. Actually, this is one of my favorite topics. I think this is something that is really, really problematic in the United States, especially. Let me just preface it because I feel like a lot of people here are new and you may not know me. First of all, as you can hear, I'm not American, right? And so I moved to the United States 15 years ago, and I am Polish by birth. I grew up some of it in Poland, but a majority of my young adult life, I spent in Asia. And so, I have an interesting perspective on, like, as a European, Eastern European, growing up in Asia, moving to the United States. And I lived in Asia for 32 years, right? So that's 22 years, sorry. That's a long, long time. And, one of the big shockers of coming to the US was, oh my God, everything is so sweet. There is sugar in everything. Even a Polish kielbasa has sugar, which is like, how dare there? This is completely wrong. And I remember going for cocktails with my colleagues and thinking, like, I can't even taste that flavor of that margarita because all I'm tasting is just that syrup in it, And so you may not realize how much sugar there is in everything when you live in the United States. Maybe even your own sugar consumption is so high you may not even realize how much it's impacting you. And one of the big things that I'm, getting a lot of criticism for is how much of how restrictive I am with sugar consumption. Let me tell you, prove me wrong on this one. But if you are insisting that your body is metabolizing sugar the way it was when you're 20s or 30s, prove me wrong that is exactly the same as it is now. Over summers, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you can have your ice cream and then have a cocktail and then have a muffin, right? And whatever else. It'll be fine. You're like stick like this. You're going to be wearing the bikini, feel comfortable, no problem, right? Try to do this now. Try to do this now and have all of this over summer, and you're gonna come back with 30 pounds of like flabby weight, feeling tired, exhausted, sleepless, and angry with yourself for having done that. And it tells you that the way we metabolize sugar in our 40s and 50s is different, is completely different. So the reason why I talk about this is because the metabolism of sugar is a couple of functions, right? So a couple of things is going to impact this. And once you understand what metabolizes sugar in the body, then you know how to fix it, right? The first thing is actually, let's start off with the first thing. First thing is be aware of how much sugar you're consuming. And I am not for like micromanaging things of like writing down everything that you're consuming and like counting calories. None of that. I think that's just obsessive. It's an unhealthy behavior. But what I am a fan of is for a week or so and get your kids or grandkids involved in this. Do a detective work on how much sugar there is in everything you're consuming. That ketchup, that dressing, that juice, that dessert, that salad dress, the salad you're making, right? That everything, right? All in one. And in the muffin, the gluten-free muffin that you're buying from Trader Joe's, you're like, oh, ouch, that's 40 grams of sugar. Ow, did not know that. And then you'll be surprised to see that at the end of the day, you're consuming something like 80, 90 grams of sugar. And for visual representation, so it sticks in your head, 4 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon, right? So if a muffin from Trader Joe's is 40 grams, that gives you 10 teaspoons of sugar right out of the gate. In fact, their labeling was so bad the last time I looked, which was a few years ago, that it gave you the reading of the sugar for half a muffin. I mean, who eats half a muffin? Have you ever eaten half a muffin? Because I haven't. Even if it's a big fat muffin like that, I'll have the whole damn muffin. But then, then it's 80 grams of sugar, and that's 20 teaspoons of sugar. And your body just doesn't know what to do with it in our 40s and 50s. It does not metabolize it as well. So the first thing, step one, is being aware of how much sugar you're consuming. And then just on the second point about, so that's your exercise for the weekend, okay? We're going into the weekend, start the detective work, pull out your little notes thing on your computer, or if you were like more of a writing kind of a notepad person, just write down everything you're consuming every day. And the banana that you're putting in your smoothie. And please do not fight with me that fruit does not count as sugar, because if you're sitting all day long eating bananas and pineapples and putting honey on top of it, it's all natural sugar. In fact, let me tell you, in Mexico, it's kind of funny. They go, no sugar muffins. And I'm like, no, that's a disgusting muffin. There's no sugar in this muffin. And then I look at the ingredients, right? And they go, oh, it's got banana and it's got this juice, right? And I'm like, hey, how come you say there's no sugar in that? And they go like, oh, there's no added sugar. I'm like, oh, okay, no added sugar. Okay, right. But it all adds up. The sugar in the banana, the sugar in the berries is gonna be way better than a straight up sugar for corn sugar, right? From, let's say, in your granola, right? For sure. But it's still, the body does not differentiate and it'll still treat it as a sugar. So putting all of this together, including the sugar that's contained in the food itself, and see what you come up with. And you might be surprised. When I was in private practice, I was asking my clients to do that. There was always a big surprise, including the smoothies they were doing, including the shakes that they were adding. That was always a shocker. Okay, the next thing is I want you to stop doing sugar for breakfast. If you can switch over to start your day with something savory right out of the gates. It will set you up for success for the rest of the day versus doing something sweet. When you do sweet stuff, like including oatmeal with your fruit and all of that stuff, which is all carbs and sugar at the end of the day, and grains, by the way, also get converted to sugar. All of that is going to be setting you up for like a spike of sugar. Then you're going to drop. And then in the drop, this is the time you're gonna be like, oh, I need more. Now I need a coffee. And I need something else to pick up my energy. And I need something else to pick up my blood sugar levels because I'm in a ditch. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to put our body through that roller coaster. So what you can do is start off with a savory breakfast, and that's going to set you up for success. What is a savory breakfast? If you have my cookbooks, one of the cookbooks, Cooking for Hormone Balance, is we have recipes there. Most of my breakfast recipes are savory without eggs, because I personally can't do too many eggs. So I developed the recipes in a way that they are without eggs. But if you can do eggs, then sure, you can do eggs or do dinner leftovers. And if you follow us on Instagram and in my stories, I often post breakfast ideas of what I'm eating for breakfast. So that's the first food-wise thing you can do. Okay. The second thing we want to do is to, once you transition to that, now what you want to do is you want to optimize your receptors for them to open up more, and for the insulin to grab up all the sugar from the bloodstream and then sweep it up and open up the receptor in the cells, and then get that insulin to basically enter and clear that glucose out of your stream. Now, for that to happen, there is a couple of herbs that you can use that help to upregulate. We call it upregulating insulin receptors, and that can make a huge difference. So things like berberine, cinnamon, fenugreek, right, chromium, picolate are all wonderful things that can help with that. In fact, we have a product called Glucomaximus. So you're maximizing your glucose, right, levels in a body, called Glucomaximus, that contains a number of those things that I just mentioned. So, but can this work when you are eating 80 grams of sugar a day? It's unfair, right, for those herbs to work, and you expect your body to be like, oh, now I'm going to be all nice and trim, and, I'm going to metabolize sugar really nicely, while I'm like having my 2 muffins of a breakfast, and then, having my 3 glasses of wine at night, right? Like, the body just can't keep up. So when you combine a supplement like Glucomaximus, like all the herbs that I mentioned, with a low sugar diet, and get that sugars out of your life, then that's when you really see the magic starts happening. This is when people start going like, wow, this is just now really melting away, Let me just go over to Instagram. I'm sure I'm gonna get some fruit haters because that always happens. There we go. What are your thoughts from sugar from fruit? So I think I've already answered that. Okay, so then we have start with protein for the day. Example, eggs, cottage, sausage. Yeah, that's if you can do eggs and dairy. I personally cannot do dairy, so cottage is not an option. Cottage cheese is not an option for me, but sausages could be a piece of meat, piece of chicken, piece of steak, and heaps of vegetables. That's a really cool way of starting your day. All right, let's take a couple of questions. Heidi, do you want to pop some questions that've come in through Facebook and see what we can do? So Michelle is saying that she cannot do. What if you cannot do HRT? So yeah, so Michelle, that's actually kind of interesting topic, because there's more and more research actually coming out about that and the previous, perception of HRT. So I'm curious if you're still listening. What are the reasons why you cannot do HRT? And there is actually, it's kind of interesting how the pendulum is swinging from HRT is gonna kill you, give you breast cancer. Now is swinging to the other side that says HRT can actually protect you, and should be started earlier than later. And we are actually, and that's actually that's all we have for. And so actually it's going to be protective, and it might be better to start it sooner than later. So, but if somebody cannot do HRT, there is natural stuff. So like, actually one thing I forgot to mention about progesterone is Vitex. So for example, if you cannot do progesterone, my very disheveled dog, that's what happens when you live in a desert. My dogs look like, very disheveled. So if somebody cannot do progesterone, for example, then Vitex is a really good option. And we have that in our store as well. If you look for just Vitex, that's in a supplement form. Vitex, you guys, is a fascinating herb, because in Europe it was used as it still is used by even mainstream medicine doctors to help women boost their progesterone levels if they can't get pregnant, or women who have hot flashes. Vitex is the first go-to herb that I use. It's covered by insurance, and don't get me started. So that could be an option. And then the other one for progesterone would be just like what I mentioned earlier, is the vitamin A, E, and C. They can potentially help you if you still have your uterus. For estrogen, it will be flaxseed, black cohosh, red clover, hops, and Norwegian spruce. They all have estrogenic properties. So hopefully that's going to be enough for you, and work with a skilled herbalist who can guide you through it and do higher doses. So this is an interesting question. What would sugar withdrawals look like, and how long does it take for the body to break the addiction? That's a really great question. And can I just mention, let me just tell you the end game of this. When you do a sugar detox, and first of all, thank you for recognizing this, that this is a problem. Because I think a lot of people have this issue, which is no different than being an alcoholic. You can be a sugar addict the same way. It's just, not realize that. Is the end game of it is that when you break that addiction, everything that you then put in your mouth, it's like, wow, this is so sweet. I can't believe I drank this margarita in this bar before, because all I can taste is sugar. I can't even taste the beautiful lime or the hibiscus or whatever the margarita is made with, So the withdrawals can be like with any detox, right? Headaches, migraines, inability to sleep, getting really crabby, right? And the good news is that it passes, right? These things pass. Like, you don't detox forever. And if you give yourself like a couple of weeks, I would say the first probably 3-4 days might be the toughest, and then it gets better. People always ask me, like, would you rather do it cold turkey or do it progressively? It really depends on a person. If you are the type of person who progressively doesn't work because you just have no sense of self-control, then maybe going cold turkey is going to be better for you. And then how long does it take to break the addiction? Yeah, so one thing here is to remember is, why do you have a sugar addiction in the first place, right? Is it driven by a physiological thing, like, for example, having a candida, yeast overgrowth? For those of you who have ever made a beer before, or you heard about it, the yeast in the beer grows on what? On sugar, right? Like, for those of you who make beer, you use sugar or things that contain sugar in order to make a beer. So the yeast can grow on it. In the same way, your body, when you have cravings for things such as sugar, for example, is it because you have a yeast infection? Then it's going to be a really hard battle to fight. So work with somebody to help you establish whether you have a yeast infection or not. And I like the OAT, organic acid test, for testing someone just to see whether you have yeast. And so if you do, then you're going to eradicate that first, do whatever you need to do, and then do the detox, or do it concurrently with protocol, because then you're doing some antifungals. And then when you're doing the antifungal, it's going to work beautifully when you reduce your sugar, eliminate sugar in your diet. And then, or the other side of it is like, or is the body craving sugar because it gives you a dopamine hit, and so it becomes more of an emotional addiction, right? And I remember once when I was going through nutrition training, one of the things our tutor was talking about is like people who were, for example, rewarded with chocolates or cookies or whatever as a kid, like, job well done, right? Here's your cookie. Excuse me. And so are you using sugar as sort of to make you feel better, and so if it is that more of an emotional mental thing, then you need to find a different way of raising that dopamine levels, but not with sugar, right? So so there's that. Okay. Let's see. Sesames and sunflower in what days of the cycle? So in the luteal phase. So from your time of ovulation, if you're still cycling, from the time of ovulation until you get your period. And if you are not menstruating anymore, or it's like all over the place, and you can just do it like 25 days out of a month. Raspberry leaf is really nice for balancing hormones, Lana is saying. Absolutely, I agree. Can you use black cohosh and clover with endometriosis? Yeah, so that's a controversial question. My answer to this is absolutely yes, and I'll tell you why is it controversial. People who know little about hormones, are ignorant about this topic, just take a very myopic view of, oh, if you have endometriosis, you have estrogen dominance, you already have too much estrogen, and so therefore you should not be adding black cohosh or red clover, right? Which is kind of makes sense, but except that it doesn't, because when you have estrogen dominance, the bigger problem is how your body metabolizes those estrogens to clean and dirty estrogen. That happens mainly in the liver, right, and the gut. So for those of you who have done the Dutch test before, you can see the 2, 4, and 16 metabolites, and then from there you know whether how are you breaking out those estrogens. So is black cohosh or red clover bad when you have estrogen dominance? No, because your body needs estrogen to function. It's just that you haven't supported your liver correctly in order to produce more of those clean estrogens versus those dirty estrogens. So, this is the same question with like women with estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. Should they use black cohosh or red clover? And the answer is resounding yes. There's no reason for a woman to be suffering through hot flashes and forgetfulness and be like half a life because she had a history of breast cancer, estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, where she needs that estrogen, right? The problem is, again, no doctor, most allopathically trained oncologists and physicians are not trained to understand metabolism of estrogen and checking for that and supporting the patient so that you take that estrogen and metabolize it the correct way, the clean way, and actually giving you all the benefits, the beautiful benefits of estrogen, and making sure you don't produce those dirty estrogens. So whether it's endometriosis that you have, by the way, for those of you asking about endometriosis, this is, I think, already a second question. I've actually written a book about estrogen dominance called Overcoming Estrogen Dominance. It's on Amazon. And if you just enter estrogen dominance Magdalena, it comes out. And there's a whole chapter on endometriosis, of what to do, diet, supplements, and lifestyle changes. When in the cycle would one test for progesterone estrogen? So if you're doing if you're still cycling and you're doing urine testing, you want to do it in the middle of your luteal phase. So typically that would be between day 17 to 20, around there, where your progesterone and estrogen are the highest. Okay. Which is more reliable, Dutch test, which is dry urine, or blood test? Absolutely Dutch test. So Dutch test is not for everything. Dutch test is great for estrogen, progesterone is okay. It's not the greatest. DHEA, understanding all your estrogens, estrogen metabolism, cortisol, that's great for that, right? But Dutch test is not great for blood sugar levels. With blood test, this is where blood test comes in. Blood test is great for blood sugar levels, thyroid hormones. It's great for your FSH if you want to see if you are entering perimenopause or menopause. FSH, LH, your follicle stimulating hormone, your luteinizing hormone, LH, all great to do through blood. It's only to do it through blood. A lot of other markers are great for blood. So they are just, it's not one or the other. I would do it as I do my testing once every 6 months, and I do a whole long list of blood tests, and then I, of course, always do Dutch tests. For those of you who are new here, my history is I come from a family where I inherited genes on both sides of my family that I'm a horrible estrogen metabolizer. Horrible. And that explains why I've always had issues with estrogen dominance my whole life. Why both sides of my family have seen deaths from my aunts, both sides of the family, from estrogen and cancer. I've lost my aunts to uterine, cervical cancer, both estrogenic, and breast cancer on the other side, right? So I'm like a walking time bomb in many ways, except that I wrote a book about it because at first I started gathering all the information for myself, what I need to do. So I'm not a number, I'm not a statistic in my family. And so now I'm doing that, and that's why I'm managing my estrogen dominance. Every 6 months I do testing on it. There were some other questions that came in earlier. I want to just start that. Just go back to those. Sandra saying, oh my God, that's me, the breast and anxiety. Yeah, so your low progesterone, it can definitely be causing, that. And this is, like somebody saying about what do you suggest for someone who has an endometriosis who's had a total hysterectomy? And this is an example of someone, this is how dysfunctional allopathic medicine is, right? And they go, well, you have endometriosis, so it's all in the uterus, so we just remove the uterus, right? And I'm assuming your endometriosis was very active around the uterine space, and so they remove then not addressing the root cause of it, right? And is estrogen dominant? Which is estrogen dominance? Is estrogen dominance going to stop because you remove the uterus? Of course not, right? And now this woman is having endometriosis that can grow elsewhere, or she might be having a lot of other issues, like suddenly her breasts are just showing up lumpy. The next thing you know, she's got cervical cancer, right? Or uterine cancer, or now she's got no uterus, so she can't have fibroids anymore, right? But she might be having, the severe headaches, right? That can be estrogen dominant. So, or putting on weight around her thighs and hips, so she just can't lose. And so the list just goes on and on. It's just crazy. So really having a understanding of what's causing something can just be really so changing. And I think that's why you guys are here, right? You get that. Kate is asking, what's the best way to test hormones? So I think I've already mentioned Dutch test is great for all of those hormones that I mentioned, all this, the steroid hormones. For peptide hormones like thyroid, blood sugar levels, blood is totally great. I am not a fan of saliva testing, just FYI. I just find like it's not really helpful. And it's not accurate in any way. I used to do together with my urine just to kind of for the fun of it, and compare and see. And saliva was just so off. And when I used to be in my in a private practice, it was the same thing. Like I just felt it was not corresponded with my clients' symptoms. Sandra is asking, is chasteberry good for progesterone? Yes, I covered that before. It is, and we have it in our store as well. I joined late. Are you saying you try to these herbs? So are you saying to try these herbs to try avoid hormone replacement therapy? No, that's not what I. That's okay. You joined late, so the answer is no. Is to try herbs and nutrition first, and then if once it stops working, it's not working anymore, then you go to hormone replacement therapy. There's a few of you who have requested to talk about why hormone replacement therapy does not work for some women. And my observation is that it doesn't work as well because you're inflamed. So I love everything that's happening, in our space right now, where it's like we are like having this renaissance, I should say, or awakening, right? Of like, actually, HRT is really good for women. It saves women's lives and gives us quality of life. We can, be back in a workspace and functioning well and all of that. Great. And I totally agree. And I'm a big proponent of HRT. Like I said, I'm on 5 different hormones and no one is taking them away from me. And I feel fabulous. But there's also time and place for this. And the reason why I think they don't work for some women, or they work initially and they stop to work, is because of inflammation. Something a lot of physicians are not aware of is that when you are inflamed, because you're not sleeping, because you're drinking alcohol, because of all the sugar consumption, right? All of that stuff that because of chronic stress, because of living in a toxic place, or maybe being in a toxic relationship, maybe you're dealing with PTSD that's unresolved for many years, whatever is your source of your inflammation. What happens is the cells become not so receptive for HRT at that point. And so you might be even going up in doses of like more estrogen, more progesterone, and more testosterone, or DHEA rather. And it's like, but I'm feeling even worse, or it's just not working. And so if that is happening to you, one of the things you could do is go on the elimination diet. All my cookbooks are based on that. Elimination diet, when you lower the inflammation, prioritize sleep, stop drinking alcohol, eliminate as much as you can sugar in your life, down to 20 grams. I forgot to say that. Your goal is to be less than 20 grams a day of sugar, okay? That gives you 5 teaspoons. That's it, all added, including foods that are that contain sugar. And then when you do that, that's when the HRT might work a lot better. So try that, report back, because you might see a big change there. Okay. So I hope this was helpful, you guys. I wish there was like a quick answer of like, do this and your weight is gonna melt away in perimenopause. Oh, one more thing I did mention cortisol, and I want to start wrapping up the call. So I would just say one thing about cortisol, and that is cortisol typically rises a lot in perimenopause. And one thing you're doing to make it worse is adding more cardio. Okay. So for those of you who are cardio junkies, like the way I used to be, runner, biker, runner again, biker again, and feel like I haven't got my exercise without doing some heavy cardio, you gotta stop. Or do 5 minutes of HIAT, right? So short express very very expressive, very expensive cardio, but then the rest of it you've got to switch to weight training, resistance training, slower stuff like yoga, stretching, walking, right? But strength training is really the thing that you want to do, and it's going to help your cortisol levels to be in a much healthier way. When you're constantly stressed out, especially women gets very stressed out with what's happening in perimenopause, right? It's frustrating, like what's happening to us. It's like a lot of women feel like our body's betraying us, like things that worked in the past are just not working anymore. And then our hormones start fluctuating, and you're like, my husband is a dick, my children are just absolutely obnoxious, my dog is driving me crazy, I'm gonna room home it because I can't take it, right? And it's just like, it's just like the whole world is falling apart, and that drives part of the cortisol issue. The problem with cortisol being high like that is that cortisol is the steroid hormones. If you think about it, you're kind of like injecting yourself with steroids all day long. you know and if you know someone who has been on steroids before, for example, because of cancer treatment or whatever treatment, they put on weight and just can't lose it. They can be on 600 calories a day, they just wouldn't lose that weight. So that's what cortisol, chronic cortisol release, does to you. So cardio is not going to help. Weight training, something softer, lighter, more gentle to your body, is going to make a much bigger difference. And there's a lot of women I know who stopped doing crazy cardios and they actually started losing weight after they gave their body some rest. So okay. I hope this was helpful, you guys, this call today. And like I was beginning to say, I wish there was like one magical thing I will say, like, do this one thing, and all that weight is gonna melt away in perimenopause. If it was that simple, you would have known it by now, right? So I just want to be like super transparent with you and kind of lay the land and share with you there's just so many different things. And one of you might be that you're dealing with low estrogen and high cortisol levels, and go and fix that. Another somebody else might be just struggling because you have low progesterone issue and low cortisol levels, and you're gonna fix that, and it's gonna take care of your weight, right? So we all are different, and that's why I think it's unfair to just give people one solution. The benefit of, I think, that I bring to the table is just showing you there's a lot of different things you can do. But the not so good thing about it is that it becomes more complex. And I know, especially in social media, you want like quick, like, I have like 60 seconds to tell you something. Like, how am I supposed to do that? And that's frustrating because I feel like it's a disservice in many ways. So we're trying. Anyway, Heidi just posted a perimenopause quiz. For those of you who are not sure if you're in perimenopause, you want to take a quiz and see how deep you are into perimenopause. We have like the 3 levels of perimenopause and what to do about it. Then head out to, do you want to drop it in the comments, Heidi? Just put it on the comments and the link itself, and they should be able to do it. And then if you're on Instagram, for those of you on Instagram, we can also drop it into Instagram as well. I'll do 2 more questions and we wrap up. How do you test cortisol levels? I like using Dutch, is very telling. And when you do the cortisol in Dutch, DUTCH, if you do that in Dutch, then you can also, actually, it's also very telling about your thyroid hormones, interestingly. Can you raise estrogen naturally in menopause? Yes, I talked about it at the beginning. You can with flaxseed, red clover, black cohosh. Those are all wonderful herbs and foods that can help you raise estrogen naturally to a certain degree. And if it doesn't work at some point, you might want to consider HRT if you can. All right, everybody. I hope this was helpful. Do that exercise that I mentioned. Count the amount of sugar you're consuming in your daily thing. Do it for a week. Do a little bit of a detective work. It's kind of fun to get your kids involved as well, or your grandkids, and be like, okay, let's do a bit of a detective work. How much sugar in this ketchup? How much in this salad dressing? How much sugar in this muffin? And in my smoothie. The next thing I was like, my smoothie's got 60 grams of sugar. And then target 20 grams a day. That's your thing. That's your target. And for those of you who want to check out our supplements, the few that I mentioned, like Glucomaximus is just an amazing mover for your blood sugar regulation. Then you can go to wellena.com. That's our website. All right. I hope this is helpful. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Take care of yourself, and I shall see you sometime soon. Bye for now.